So Alpha is a growth fund that works with over 500 early stage specialist funds to be their growth capital. Early stage specialist funds, like the two we have here today, fund 3/4 of the unicorns and IPOs in tech. But they only follow on in their growth rounds about 10–20% of the time. So Alpha fills that funding gap with them as a true partner. And in exchange for the introduction, the information they bring, and the legal right to invest in these growth rounds, we share the economics with them. So as a result, Alpha has seen about 500 growth deals from over 400 VCs, and we've picked the best 18. That's the Alpha model. We found it a great way to get returns at the growth stage and to be a true partner to specialist VC firms, such as the two we have here today. So without further ado, again, I'm welcoming you all to chat in the chat. Hope you'll participate through chat. And I'd like to introduce Ross Iverson of Manitree. They are a $150 million food supply chain venture capital firm that invests globally. They brought a great company with them, Verda Farms. So please welcome Ross, who's going to talk about his investment space. And let's learn from Ross. Thanks. Ross, you're up.
Hey, thanks, Brian, for having me here today. As Brian mentioned, I'm the Chief Investment Officer and one of the co-founders of Manitree. And I thought I would share a little bit with you with kind of our overview as I talk through this so you can kind of follow along. Manitree was formed a little over 2 years ago, and we really set out to look at how do we clean up the health and of the food supply chain. And with all of kind of the rapid innovations going on, what we think we found over the last couple of years is this acceleration of consumers' interest, not only in healthy food, but also in how the food is produced. So I'll walk you through a little bit of that in the intro, and then I get to introduce one of our amazing CEOs of one of our firms here today. So, as I said a little bit, our mission really is focused around health, but how do we get the scientific innovations that are happening in and around the food supply chain to prove it out? So I would say Manitree is less about better for you and more about great for you. And how do we make sure that we're optimizing the consumption of food to make us all healthier? Most of our diseases we're finding now, 7 out of 10 of them are linked to poor nutrition and diet. So if we scale our companies and do a good job, ultimately the population will be healthier. Here's just a brief look at our current team that focuses. We've got Ellie Rubenstein, Brent Driven, and myself are the co-founders. Ellie is the daughter of David Rubenstein of the Carlyle Group. David's part of our GP, so we get an amazing amount of mentorship, network connectivity, and is probably one of the reasons why we have investors in 18 countries and have 130 families backing our first fund, which is just amazing to have that breadth of network effect as part of our strategy. So let's look a little bit about kind of where we look at key factors driving functional health from our standpoint. Obviously, we've got these macro trends. You've got new science and technology that's coming in on the production side, whether that's robotics or ag tech. But you also are starting to see it on the human health side in some of the DNA components. We're also looking a lot into diabetes right now with what some of those monitoring systems can do. And people are wanting to be healthier for obviously a lot of reasons. One is, in COVID days, immunity. So how do we have immunity protection to live a normal life when we're living in a world with outside factors? Longevity, obviously to maximize life and in a way where you can be mobile and mentally healthy. And then I think the other thing we're seeing now is this concern around the obesity rates in children and how as a population can we be accelerating obesity with kids under 10? There's something definitely wrong with the system. So our job at Manitree is to form capital around that in order to move the needle in that area. So I'm going to skip through. This slide has a lot of different components of where we look at deals.
Hey, Ross.
But, yeah.
Ross, it doesn't look like your slides are advancing. You might want to reshare.
Okay. What slide did we stop on?
We are on the overview slide. The first slide.
Oh, sorry about that. All right, let's see what we can do here. Is that sharing now?
Yep.
Okay. Do they advance now?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So as you can look, there's a lot of different subsectors in this healthy food space that needs capital. And what we feel like is that we can bring new private capital to accelerate change quicker. Obviously, we've got great partnerships with some of the legacy food companies and some of the big platforms globally. But at the same point, we feel like these new innovating companies that are, have hit 25, 50, 100 million in revenue, if they can get really strong investment partners that believe what they believe, then you get a supportive board that's not making them degrade their product quality in order to squeeze out a tenth of a point of margin here or there. And I think that's super important for how we work with companies, is they look at us having an aligned interest where we're not going to sacrifice that area. So where Manna-Tree really wins in the marketplace is we found that there's a gap, a gap in the capital stack where large family offices can participate in this $25 to $50 million round, but we like to put in 15 million from our fund and then partner with people or bring in co-investors to fill out the round. And there's a lot of venture food funds in the marketplace right now that just can't get into the 25 to 50. And then a lot of the larger middle market PE shops aren't willing to go down to that level because food companies are hands-on. I'm sure Delphine, you'll talk to that on your end too, but these companies have very complex supply chains, talent needs, marketing and distribution needs, and it's not a sector that you can passively just throw on your cap table and hope that it's going to grow at 20, 25% a year IRR. So I will stop there because I'm super excited to have Dana, one of our portfolio CEOs of Verde Farms, talk a little bit about his platform. And with Manna-Tree, we've done a few plant-based investments and a few traditional protein investments, and Verde Farms really checks the boxes on what it means to do traditional protein in kind of, I would say, the next gen fashion. So Dana, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Ross. And let me share my screen as well. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you, Ross. And again, my name is Dana Ehrlich. I'm the founder and CEO of Verde Farms. I started the company in 2005 after a business school exchange program to Argentina and spending some time on the Pampas and at an estancia and getting to see the way that cattle is raised on the Pampas in the pasture. And growing up in the Boston area, I really didn't know much about our food and supply chain. But when I came back to the US in 2005 and started to investigate the way that cattle are raised in the US versus how it's done abroad, I thought there was a great opportunity to try and change the food supply chain from the US. And it really started with this concept of being elemental. And so what does Verde Farms do? We try to deliver delicious, responsible, and elemental beef to people who want mealtime to feel memorable and meaningful. And it's a really different approach than the conventional producers, which are trying to mass produce meat at the lowest quality price. There's a big differentiation from what the US conventional supply chain does and how they raise the animals. Traditionally in the US, it's a monocrop system based on grains and predominantly corn. And that corn uses a lot of pesticides and fertilizers that go down through our river systems and hurt the fish populations, then go into the feedlot system. You can see a picture here of the cattle really jammed in. That produces fat animals and cheap beef, but it has a lot of negative externalities. We have a completely different supply chain where the cattle are out on pasture and benefiting obviously the animals, but also the people that eat the meat and the planet as well. And it's really a regenerative agricultural approach where this is very sustainable. 90% of what we do is organic on top of being 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. The core insight that we look at from a product standpoint is that life's really complicated. And we wrote this more than 6 months ago before COVID. Obviously, everything's accelerated with that. But when it comes to food, we want things to be simple, delicious, We want people to buy food that match their values. And so that when they do that, they can focus on the really important stuff. And we think that part of that is culinary exploration and the enjoyment and company of others. From a cultural standpoint, we try to match our supply chain, which is very clean, very simple, and timeless. And we like to think, instead of plant-based, we actually like plants. And so here you can see a very traditional meal. We in Uruguay, which is one of our primary sources, but we do source globally, now sourcing across 4 different continents, with most of our sales in the US. In terms of the supply chain, it's as simple in some ways and timeless as it could be. Here you have a gaucho out on the range with beautiful looking cattle, rotational grazing, and very simple. They're out there eating grass. They have access to shade, access to water, and for typically kind of a 2 to 3 year life cycle. No added growth hormones, no antibiotics, natural pastures. And I think the vision of what consumers expect to see when they purchase beef. In terms of the product itself, it's a leaner, cleaner, and true beef flavor. Traditionally in the US, when you have your beef, you taste a lot of fat, and I think of it as something like a tomato, which is very watery but big and shiny, or a beer like a Budweiser, or more like that heirloom tomato or Sam Adams, something that's really rich in flavor and delicious for the people that enjoy that. In terms of the animals, we talk about 5 freedoms, things again like access to water and food, shade, having even humane methods at the time of slaughter, everything throughout that supply chain. And you contrast those pictures of the animals on the pasture to what a feedlot looks like. And this is a pretty big feedlot. And as you can imagine, there's huge negatives in terms of this system, in terms of the health of the animal, E. coli concerns, all of the waste runoff. You do get cheap and plentiful beef, but again, there's a lot of negative issues as a result. So we are better for the planet. Again, we're very much restoring the pasture lands. When you go through these areas, you hear a lot of birds, you see other animals beyond the cattle. It's a sign of a very healthy ecosystem. And then we get to the dinner plate and grass-fed beef distribution in the US. Conventional beef is mostly growing at around the rate of GDP growth, somewhere in the 2 to 3% range. From output, grass-fed and particularly organic grass-fed is the fastest growing segment, and that's been a 15 to 20% plus annual growth rate for at least the last 5 to 10 years, and projected that this will continue to be the fastest growing segment within the beef category. And then lastly, we are very focused on innovation and not just what we call raw single ingredient beef, but making beef easier to eat in the home. We're rolling out a line of sous vide, fully cooked products with 8 different SKUs out to the marketplace literally this week. It's hitting the shelf, and very excited to add this to the marketplace. Thank you. Turning back over to Brian.
Brian might have fallen off, so no problem. Delphine.
Time for those of us here on the East Coast.
Oh, Brian, you're cutting out. You're cutting out.
Okay, yeah, so Brian's gonna fix his issues with the internet. Delphine with Creative is our next specialist VC. If you wanna go next, Delphine.
Yes, hello everyone. I will share my screen as well with you. I prepared just a few slides and I'm happy to share them if you want to after the presentation. So I manage the New York office of CreaDev. A few words on who we are. So CreaDev, we're a single family office. We are backed by a French family called the Mullier family. 6 generations, 700 family members, so big family. They are the founders and operators of worldwide retail leaders such as Auchan, Decathlon, Leroy Merlin. Some of you may know these companies. They employ over 700,000 people, over 100 billion annual revenues. So it's a pretty big retail environment that we navigate in. And so the family next to those retail companies have founded CreaDev. We're a team of 30 people located in 4 countries. The main office is in Paris, but we also have offices in Shanghai, China, in Nairobi, Kenya, and Africa, and so in New York. And I'm in New York. And we usually like to lead or co-lead, and we invest to be active shareholders with board seats. In terms of investing, our main focus, and actually sole focus here in the US, is food and ag tech. We invest in venture mainly in the US. We're more on the private equity side in Europe. And we invest between 2 and 10 million. We very often do follow-on investments. We can go up to 50 million annually. We invest about 250 million, and more than half of these investments are reinvestments in our portfolio companies. So just a few words on, how we think we are different, or we put that forward, is first on the value side of things. On the left side, as you can see, 3 main values that we have is 1, we value time. We think entrepreneurs need time, especially in the food space. So we keep things very open. We have the flexibility of being backed by 1 family. So we know that in some portfolio companies will exit. Not, founders can exit. Other co-investors may want to exit as well. But others may want to, create a big adventure with us for 15, 20 years. And we're here and potentially we'll back them and create that big growth story with them. So we keep things open. The second value is we love mission-driven entrepreneurs with profitable mindsets. As an image, we like to say we invest in entrepreneurs that have their heads in the stars and their feet on the ground. And the third value is we give a lot of importance to strong governance, with leadership team around a project, with a very strong board, well composed and well functioning. And how do we achieve that? We always wanted to be international, but we didn't want to invest in the US from a Paris office. We wanted to be international but local, which is why we have offices and people on the ground to understand, culture, business, create networks, and be really close to our entrepreneurs. We also wanted to focus and really have that expertise. So we don't want to invest in. We want to become as best experts as we can in the food space to know what we're talking about, and help our entrepreneurs as much as we can. And then the last one is really our network. I guess with all these retail companies that the family has founded worldwide, we have quite a unique network, but it's also a network of finding the right, partners that we want to invest in. And we've partnered also with entrepreneurs that have succeeded in the food space. We found that very, very valuable as we look to invest in more companies. So our mission, what do we do at CreaDev? We have a pretty straightforward mission. It's bringing healthy and sustainably grown food to as many people as possible. So that's our guiding star. And why does the family want to do that? Well, you have these figures. I'm sure also you have seen these. The malfunction of the global food system, not only thinking food waste, but plastic issues, polluted soils. We're going to be 10 billion in 2050, obesity, diabetics. I mean, these are all such big issues that the Mullier family, had to invest and step in and allocate capital, time, efforts, and people in that space. So, few words on our current investment thesis. We have 3. The first one is aquaculture. Is a big space for us, from fish feed to aquaculture systems. We have another vertical that we, call plants. It's really around agriculture, biocontrol. We invested also in indoor farming, digital farming, and plant-based ingredients in food. And the third vertical that we have, and I circled it, is because it's the theme of today. It's really around what we call future of food access. So, it's starting from food waste to what B2B digital solutions you can implement to help improve the supply chain, to really what are the new sustainable food distributions. I have put another slide to indicate, what really we're talking about in the future of food access. I won't get into too much detail, since slides are shared, you'll be able to see. I always like to see what other investors invested in, how they break up the food space, because we all have our different subsegments. So, but you really see on the left the food waste optimization. This is where you're going to see Hungry Harvest, and I will leave Evan, founder and CEO, speak about Hungry Harvest in just a second. And then underneath, really digital solutions, it's around quality, traceability, business analytics, all those different innovative B2B solutions that can be implemented. And on the right, it's really more about how do you prepare food, what innovative business models around offline food access, online access, consumer apps, etc. And so that leads me to really the theme of today, and Hungry Harvest is really what we've been seeing, and especially with COVID, is we really need to have better supply chains and less waste. It was already the case before, but it was really accelerated with COVID. And what we see also in these different figures and numbers is that consumers want more transparency and are also willing to have more sustainable consumption, methods and behaviors. And so that leads me to introduce you to Evan Lutz, who will take over and to talk to you about Hungry Harvest. We invested beginning of this year, just closed the round with also other like-minded investors such as Danone and Quadia and Megwick, and so we're very excited. Evan, to you.
Thanks so much for the intro, Delphine. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, can you guys see this? Just thumbs up.
Yeah,
great. Thanks again for the intro, Delphine, and it's a pleasure to be here with all a bunch of like-minded folks who are interested in fixing the food system. I am the CEO of Hungry Harvest. I founded it about 6.5 years ago, and I'll kind of present our worldview and present one of our core business projects that we have going on that I think is pretty relevant to this group of individuals and is relevant in the world today. So our mission is really to fight food waste and hunger. Pre-COVID, there's 20 billion pounds of produce that go to waste every single year in the United States. Some of the reasons include oranges being scarred, or apples being too big, or a grower having a buyer cancel on them, or adverse weather impacts a grower's ability to actually harvest their entire field, and so someone's left out in the field. And if food waste were a country, as alluded to earlier, it really impacts climate change. If food waste were a country, it'd be the third largest producer of climate change behind the United States and China. And for me, I really believe in the environment. And I believe that we have a really big opportunity to help fix climate change through reducing food waste. And in addition, there's a lot of food insecurity going on in the United States pre-COVID. And there's about 49 million Americans that are food insecure. And at Hungry Harvest, we try to use one problem to solve another. Now, post-COVID, COVID kind of accelerates all problems in the world, as a lot of people have alluded to. Both problems have really rapidly increased. The amount of food that was wasted in the early stages of COVID rapidly increased as a lot of producers suddenly didn't have a sales stream to their normal food service or restaurant clients. And to pivot a farm's business model on a dime or in a few weeks' notice was simply impossible. And there was quite literally billions of pounds of food going to waste in the early stages of COVID and still today. And of course, as everybody knows, there's a lot more food insecurity going around with a lot of unemployment. And so this is kind of our worldview of, we believe every person has the right to eat healthy, every fruit and vegetable deserves to get eaten, and everything that we do is driven around that core value. And so what we do is we purchase produce that otherwise would go to waste from multiple different sources of the supply chains, from farms, from wholesalers, from packing houses, everything pre-retail basically. and we source it. We bring it to our centralized warehouse and distribute it via direct-to-home subscription boxes to consumers' doors. And it's really important for us, as we believe every person has the right to eat healthy, to make sure that our prices were very affordable and our service was very accessible. And so we really believe strongly in having a low price product, an entry-level product, whereas the traditional CSA model helps a lot of farms. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture, and where people would buy into a share of a farm. It'd be typically a little bit more expensive and cost prohibitive, but also would not allow people to get the types of fruits and vegetables that they really want on a weekly basis. We wanted to flip that model on its head a little bit and make it a little bit more accessible, deliverable to somebody's door, and make it customizable as well. And so just for an example, here's some of our prices that we have across all of our different markets. It's well less than grocery, and we're really trying to penetrate the market by making sustainability top of mind as well as price for consumers. And I'd like to highlight just for a second one of the programs we have going on. I just mentioned our core business, and something we're doing in addition to our core business is a project we have called Harvest RX. Now, food can easily be medicine. Food is medicine, right? I think it was the Hippocratic Oath. I forgot his name was Hippocrates. Hippopotamus, I don't know. But he was the first person that said food is medicine, right? Kind of the founder of the modern medicine movement first said that food would be medicine. And that's really where we came up with this program. We said, why can't we go to different healthcare organizations, different insurance companies, hospitals, community organizations that are trying to improve public health, go to them with our boxes of produce and say, what kind of funding can you guys put towards to make people healthier? And so basically we've gone to a lot of different hospital systems and eventually insurance companies, some of whom we're talking to today, to really identify patients that are coming in because of chronic diseases that can be aided with a healthier diet. And so we go to these different hospital systems, they purchase boxes, we deliver it to those patients' doors, and on average, they're seeing a really tremendous benefit to both the hospital system's budget, where they're saving about $300 per patient per quarter, but also in the patient's health. The patient's losing on average 8 pounds every 2 months, and they're coming into the hospital way less often, right? So we're taking a traditional produce delivery model and actually applying it towards the healthcare space. And we see a lot of benefits in the healthcare space where the healthcare industry is going to save a lot of money by actually investing in food, and also people's health, help people's public health as an overall infrastructure will really be benefited too. We've seen a lot of hospitals actually shift more budget towards food as medicine post-COVID as well. We've seen a lot of different hospitals, such as Johns Hopkins is one I want to highlight, actually starting to feed a lot of the community, and they've seen really tremendous results in people coming into the hospital less often since the start of COVID, which is something they wanted to prevent, because they actually have access to healthy food now, and they've done a tremendous job actually funding this program. So I'll kind of leave it there. And if you guys have any questions on Hungry Harvest or the Harvest RX program specifically, feel free to ask them in the breakout room, and these slides will be shared as well. Again, thank you guys so much for having me speak. And I'll turn it back over, I guess, to Brian or Daniel.
Well, I'll give it a shot. It has my audio. I hope it's okay. I just need to give instructions for. Is it okay?
Working out, yep.
All right, so for the breakout rooms, 15 minutes in the breakout rooms. One will center around Manitree and Verida, the other around Creative and Hungry Harvest. If you want to be in the other room, just pop out into the main room and Jan Stolar will move you. Please come to the breakout rooms prepared to maybe introduce yourself in under 30 seconds. Let's all get to know each other. We have many of our own limited partners here, lots of VC friends, lots of investors. So I think it's a great way to meet some new people. And we'll go for 15 minutes, and then Creative and Manitree will sort of sum up what we learned today. So see you in the breakout room, and please enjoy the rest of the session. We'll end promptly at about 5:00. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody. So Ross should lead the session, but just to kind of give a quick background on myself, and we'll go around the horn and do the same thing. I'm Daniel Weinstein, Director of IR for Alpha Venture Partners. I'm based in New York, but living in South Florida, riding out COVID. Yeah, and if Ross, if you want to do the same, we can go around the horn, and then Ross and Dan can kind of take questions.
Yeah, that's great. Now, welcome everybody. This is probably my first breakout Zoom room, so this is kind of fun. So as I mentioned, Ross Iverson, the Chief Investment Officer and co-founder of Manitree. Our office is based in Vail, Colorado, so we look very smart now. When we started raising our first fund 2 years ago, people wondered why a remote location, but it's playing out well. We've got a team of people that just eat and breathe health wellness, which makes a huge difference when you've got a company culture there. So I would love it if everybody would give us just a quick 30-second background on who you are, and then maybe just your connection or interest in healthy food. And I don't know how we do this, Dan. If you want to, we should call people out because everybody's screen probably looks a little different.
Yeah, I'm happy to call everybody out. First on my list is Sebastiana, if you want to go real quick. Okay, no problem. Joe Sama, are you able to give a quick 10-second background? All right, third is the charm. Brad Donnelly, do you want to say a few things?
Yeah, my name is Brad Donnelly. Work at a single family office, and I'm a Alpha Ventures LP, and I guess I'm probably I grew up on a farm in Kansas, so I can probably have a relevant conversation on the cattle side here.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, good to have you, Brad. Brian Christensen.
Hey. So I run a family office here in New Jersey, and again, we're in health because we do biotech. We've been in pharmaceuticals and biotech, actually specifically around cancer for 50 years now. So anything helping, make people better is kind of what we do. And we're also an LP in Alpha Ventures as well.
Great to have you, Brian. Austin Siggety, if I pronounced that wrong, apologies.
You did a good job, thank you. I'm Austin Siggety. I'm an LP at Alpha, and a lot of real estate stuff and like that. And about 10 years ago, we got into agriculture. So now I'm the largest blueberry grower in the state of Florida, and we also do cattle.
Great, great, Austin. Praveen. Okay, Praveen is not there. Brendan Nemzin, do you want to say a few words? Okay, no problem. Roger Krakoff, are you there? All right. Fourth is the charm, Morgan Matson.
Hey, charm it is.
There you go.
I'm a PhD student at UC Davis, currently interning with Better Ventures, who's interested in leveraging technology for sustainability. And so I'm here kind of interested in the food space, trying to, understand the emerging technology needs within this sector.
Awesome. Great to have you. Cool background. And Miriam Lujan?
Yes, hi. I'm running a family office. It's my own family, and I'm from Argentina. And since we do a lot of cultivation and growing, we are also involved in trade and commodity trade and commodity trade finance.
Great. I'm sure you have some interesting talking points with Dana. And then I see people with funny names. PG is, I don't know if that's recognizable, but.
I'm Pablo Garbarino, co-founder of Verde Farms. So you have heard a lot of us at this point. I'm based in Uruguay, and I'm very happy to share my first workout session as well. I didn't know what to expect of the transition, honestly. So thank you for having us.
Great to have you. And then last but not least, our own Sam Silvershine. Do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm working at Alpha as their MBA intern. I have a background in consumer packaged goods and food and beverage. I used to brew beer, so I know a little bit about the farming life from wheat and barley, and then manage a restaurant in Manhattan.
Awesome. Great. Well, that's everybody on the call. Seems like we have a good mix of people, some family offices, some VCs. If you have any questions, feel free to just speak up or ask them in the chat. But Ross, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I think, when we have these calls, I think everybody's always interested in kind of stages of investment. This category is shifting so much. It's actually really exciting for us because it feels like when we launched Manna-Tree 3 years ago that food wasn't even an asset class. I mean, you were either looked at as a commodity investor. The ag tech funds were trying to get into tech, but I think tech investors were kind of calling their bluff with their adoption rates in some of those areas. So it's really cool now that I think that people are looking at it. With that said, I'd be curious to know from people how they view stage investing, seed capital, early stage versus more mature phases, and how they kind of view the opportunities in the marketplace. And then maybe I know we don't have much time, so maybe if we can take the first half talking about the investment metrics or opportunities people are seeing, and then the second half, maybe we can flip over to Dana and talk a little bit more of any questions that you have specifically on the food supply chain to him.
If I may go for it. There is also the stage as well as the approach of investing. Obviously, a lot in the food industry happens from the consumer perspective. So fixing the supply chain, getting it into the right hands with most efficiency and least amount of cost. Where we, Wave Equity Partners, we focus on are actually manufacturing innovations that are manufacturing innovations, meaning innovations in materials, technology, physics, chemistry, kind of innovations that allow for a transformational value proposition in the marketplace. So we have, for example, an investment. We invest in early growth. So product is already in market. It's beyond prototype. They have commercial revenue, but their revenue may be less than $5 million at the time of initial investment. And we're deploying typically about $20 million per company for growth. So our first investment in the food sector was a company involved in aeroponics, indoor farming. And they have multiple innovations that have reduced the cost of produce by nearly 50% compared to the hydroponics by reducing both capital as well as operational costs. There is a company we are engaged in now. They are in the food safety area where they have some very, very interesting ways to ensure food security in real time rather than depend on lab testing where you get the results 3 days later. And by then, food has already shipped and consumed in many cases. That results in one recall per day in the United States alone, on average $10 million of cost per recall. So there are a lot of interesting innovations that we see on the technology innovation side.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think your comments about all of the innovation needed in the chain are good. Does anybody have any thoughts about where you started it with consumer adoption and how the actual connection to the consumer is so narrow in the US as far as distribution channels? How that will get flushed through? Does anybody have any portfolio investments or ideas or thoughts on the concentration risk of just the distribution side of the industry? It doesn't seem like. Dana, do you want to jump in, because we spend time talking about this with Verde, obviously a better product, but you've got these big club platforms, grocery platforms. How have you navigated this? Because you've been at this for 15 years.
Yeah, and I can take both sides as well, both from the technology standpoint and distribution channels. So on the technology side, while we try to make the ranch side, kind of as traditional as possible. There's a lot of supply chain and technology innovation along the way. And I was thinking the theme of water in different forms, from hot water or steam intervention systems at the carcass level, high pressure pasteurization for extended shelf life, and now even sous vide, where we're taking product inside a package, cooking it at a low or medium temperature for a long time, and taking and extending shelf life from a raw product, let's say of 21, 25 days, out to over 100 days. So that's one side. And then from a infrastructure, we built out a pretty sophisticated ERP system, which you don't typically see either with meat companies or companies of our size. So I think there's a lot of room for innovation with respect to technology. On the distribution side, I mean, there is a pretty significant consolidation, both at the regional and national level between in retail. But what we're seeing are just massive shifts in just even the last 5 years or so. Obviously, Club with Costco, Sam's, and BJ's, and we sell to all three of those, are growing. Companies like Aldi are taking a lot of market share. And then you have the whole e-commerce, which is just, food was really the last place, especially perishable food. And we're seeing the growth of e-commerce during COVID massively accelerate, 100, 200+% with changes in eating habits and purchasing habits, let's say. And so I think you're going to see in the next 5-10 years just a continued very strong shift in traditional distribution networks.
So Dana, I have two questions for you. One question is where can we find your newer products? Are they at your grocery store? I heard Sam's and Costco's and all that.
Yep. So in all the three major club channels, so Costco, Sam's, and BJ's, we sell on the retail side from Market Basket in the Northeast, Schnucks, Fresh Time in the Midwest. We sell through Amazon Fresh on a national basis. So we're definitely increasing the points of distribution throughout the U.S. and in multiple channels as well.
And then my other question is, we only have 2 minutes left, but I'm curious about your response to scalability, because I really like what you're doing and the natural side of it. I'm sure most Americans do. What is the kind of response to scalability of that model? Can every farmer do that same kind of style of farming?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a while to transform. Beef is a lot harder than pork or chicken. Just look at the shelf life and the infrastructure to do it. And there's a lot of different segments that affect the way that cattle are raised, starting with the U.S. Farm Bill and the way that the crops are grown, to all the incentives for just mass volume at the lowest prices. But this is really consumer driven. And if you just look over the last 15 years, like what we're doing today couldn't have been done even 3 years ago. And so the ranchers are reacting to the consumers, and we're basically in the middle trying to match between rancher supply and consumer demand, and finding the right distribution partners to bring that out on a national level.
Yeah, that was a good question. When we have looked at these primary food producing type of businesses, I mean, we invested in Vital Farms, and we really liked Vital Farms because they had these independent farmer relationships, which made it, gave it a moat from some of the big corporate players. So that is one dynamic that we track quite a bit when we underwrite deals is their defensibility and is their scale. And unfortunately, many of these boutique, especially, in Dana's world, we looked at a number of grass-fed U.S. operations, and we just didn't see it being able to scale. Dana had already reached scale, so he didn't have to prove that out with projections. And I think that's where we're going to have a challenge, is how do you, back on some of Delphine's comments, how do you get this really good food to the masses? And then how do you have entrepreneurs like Dana that are committed to actually squeezing out the cost structure through efficiencies, technology, so by the time it hits your plate, we're not paying 3 times the amount for this healthy food.
We're about to be kicked out in 0
all right.
seconds. It looks
Thanks,
like
everyone.
There's a bit of overtime, but thank you all for joining. I think if you have any questions for Ross or Dana, feel free to email them to us at Alpha or perhaps to Ross or Dana directly. and they will share their decks after as well. So thank you all. I think we should be getting kicked out soon here. I forget how this works. You don't get to leave or you get kicked out, but you know, feel free to leave out of the main room, and I will wait here. Thank you all.
God, I wish I had this technology for my team meetings. I could just kind of, you know, move people around and change meetings, and it would be kind of nice.
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of cool stuff these days. It can be in different seats in different environments. If you watch the NBA playoffs now, they're all in seats.
Celtics. Oh.
There you go. That's how it works.
Everyone, breakout rooms are going to be fully closed in about 10 seconds, and we'll resume then.
Awesome. Brad, if I can ask, what kind of farm did you grow up on?
Raising cattle and little wheat. So.
Also wanted to mention that the VA has run some projects with some farmers markets to measure the impact on their patients. And if anybody's interested in getting some of that data, let me know and I can share it with you. But they're looking for money in order to run a project in order to do a larger scale study on that. And maybe that will be relevant to one of the things that was brought up.
Thank you, David.
David, I hope you're safe in the Bay Area as well as any others in the Bay Area. So thank you for coming. We got to wrap in a minute here. I want to give the last word to Ross and Delphine. Let me just say this. I think that the breakouts went pretty well. It's a chance to meet 16 other investors, for us to spend time with some of our limited partners who have many myriad interests, for us all to get to know each other. And that's why we don't advertise these webinars publicly. So thanks everybody for attending and being forthcoming. The next one is on October 15th, easy to remember, and it's focused on impact and inclusivity. So how are venture firms addressing impact and inclusivity? And we have got 2 great venture firms and 2 great companies coming. You'll get an invite if you don't mind. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Delphine first, then Ross to have the closing words. Welcome, everybody. Come to the next one. You'll get a link to the slides we saw today, and we'll connect you to the VCs if you so choose. So Delphine, what's your takeaway?
Yeah. No, thank you. Thanks. I mean, it was great to meet all of you and get to hear 2 great companies. I think during our session, you know, we talked about what Evan had seen on the ground in terms of food waste during the COVID peak. Definitely still continuing and a very big issue. Questions around packaging as well. There's no perfect solutions, but sustainable solutions are on the way, definitely. And I guess the big takeaway is, and would love to continue discussions around that, is how to continue to merge, you know, food and medicine. Food as medicine is a very powerful movement. As we were saying, you know, we're starting to see co-investors that invest with us that are healthcare companies, and it's great on the investment side. It's great also on the entrepreneur and the food side, because there are many synergies that could be made. I mean, produce, fruits and veggies obviously is healthy, and we should all be eating at least 5 fruits and vegetables per day. And so it's for me, it's a very big avenue, and we'll see many more coming into that space to meet not only healthcare needs, but healthy access to food.
Ron, why don't you sum up? And yeah, go ahead.
That's good. Well, in our breakout room, we talked a lot about people having investments upstream in the manufacturing and the technology space, and how the consumer adoption and consumer distribution channels obviously pose somewhat of a threat of how fast we can actually adopt some of these healthy food investments upstream in the supply chain. So I think, Brian, this is a good kind of reflection of why you do this. I think pooling family capital is an amazing thing to accelerate, but I think it's also a nod for saying, once we invest in these portfolio companies, whether it's CreaDev, Manatree, or your family office, we need to do a better job pooling our resources and connectivity on the distribution side and help pull through these portfolio companies. And that could be either working together on follow-on rounds of funding. We'll be excited to announce here in the next few weeks the partnership that Manatree and CreaDev are taking with a new investment. So I think that's a reflection of how, when you work together, sometimes you can do more good. And if there's a great technology out there that could benefit consumers' health, let's figure out a way to make that happen. And we're more than willing to serve as a resource to all of you from Manatree's standpoint to do that.
Great. And so from what we're seeing, all these companies are going to get a tailwind from the emerging millennial preferences for social justice and environmental justice. And I think that's a long-term, decade-long, non-progressive, common sense tailwind. So we believe in the investment thesis, and it's really a privilege to work with VCs like CreaDev and Manatree. So thank you for coming and bringing these great companies. So just a quick reminder on dates for any of our Alpha LPs, or even any of you that want to attend our annual meeting, which will have a side focus on EdTech, is on October 8th at 12 o'clock. And our next Essential Economy webinar is on October 15th at 12 o'clock. So we hope you'll stay on our mailing list and keep coming to these. And thank you so much. I'm sure anyone you want to meet here that you didn't get to meet, I will facilitate an introduction. And look, we're finishing right on time, and my vocal is working. So thanks all. Be well.
Thanks.
I guess the speakers are going to stay on. So if you don't mind, speakers stay on. Daniel and Dan will also stay on and kick everybody else out. Bye.
Everyone's out.
Okay. So go figure, you know, FiOS 150 megabytes are up and down, and my vocal doesn't work. And Verizon.